Okay, so this is leading in, this is my long meandering path to someone who I think is of substance, or at least is changing the world. People love him or they hate him. He's an extremely polarizing figure. He has personality oddities, which kind of makes sense when you are an extreme billionaire. And this is Elon Musk. All right, we are back with the illustrious H.G. Tudor, who I like to refer to as the friendly neighborhood narcissist. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Eric. Thank you for inviting me back on. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
And you too. I mean, I don't always get to have this mellifluous voice in my ears, so every once in a while I need to refill and get a good conversation going. Now, today we went back and forth and we've talked about different people, and I love covering subjects. Later on, I want to talk to you about Alec Baldwin, by the way, because I didn't realize it. I've done a lot of coverage of Alec Baldwin and the Rust tragedy. So down the road, I'd like to put that one in the hopper because a lot's coming down. He's going to possibly be on trial. They're refiling charges. There's things going on with Alec, and I think it would be worth revisiting, even though it's been a couple of years. But for today, I was thinking about our last conversation, and of course, Meghan Markle came up, who I don't envy your task. I find her incredibly tedious.
I agree.
And boring, and the amount of time you've had to put in. I'm glad you have done it, so I don't have to.
Well, there we are. Some of us shoulder that burden, Eric. And believe me, the only reason that I tolerate the Duchess of Industrial Beige is because so many people are interested in hearing me talk about her. Otherwise, I would have cast her to the wayside.
Those clicks are addictive. And she drops a lot of them.
Exactly. I'm quite content to prostitute myself for the purposes of gaining those views to extend my reach. And it is the case that there have been numerous instances where people have explained that they didn't know anything about narcissism until they happened upon my series about this one's wife, or Harry's wife, as I sometimes call her. And furthermore, there are other individuals who didn't realize that actually they were dealing with narcissists themselves until they came upon that series. So it is effective in that respect. One has to really ridicule her, otherwise you would become bored very, very quickly, because she is a charisma and talent-free zone. But she is prominent, and there are so many people that revel in seeing her misfortune. It's not that they hate her, they just dislike her, and they don't really like the way that she has behaved towards variety of people, her own family, the royal family, etc., though they are invested in seeing where this train wreck goes to. And of course, I provide them with entertaining educational commentary about her latest shenanigans.
Well, the Germans sometimes come up with the best words, and I think schadenfreude might come into that.
Indeed, it's interesting because there you have a lady who's internationally famous, who is a multimillionairess. She's known around the world. She gets to fly in private jets. She wears designer clothing and has expensive jewelry. But you'd be hard-pressed to find anybody outside of the sugars that would actually want to be her.
So true. So true. So in order to give you a break from that shallow person, in my opinion, and I can't wait for the comments, because last time, they came in. How dare you talk about this beautiful, precious snowflake like that? But we'll go on to the next one that should attract an equal response. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp.
Okay.
So let's start with Johnny Depp, because I do feel like Johnny Depp has more substance, like a really long career. He's a multi-talented individual, musician, actor, and by most regards, I think he's a very talented individual. Would you agree?
Yes, he is a talented actor. He has brought a decent range to the work, whether it's, for instance, when he was in Blow or Ninth Gate, or when he played Willy Wonka. I often find myself in the minority here, but I actually prefer his portrayal of Willy Wonka to that of Gene Wilder.
Well, you are in the minority.
Yeah, I'm quite content with that.
It's okay. You could be wrong. I still appreciate you.
Well, you may well think that, but there are sound reasons for why I believe that. Nevertheless, he is a talented actor and he has a considerable fan following, notwithstanding, of course, the dent that it might have taken as a consequence of the allegations that were made against him. But there is substance there, yes.
Okay, and unlike a lot of names who come up with you, he's sort of unique because you've stated he is not a narcissist.
Well, to provide some context, it isn't that I label everybody as a narcissist, but understandably, I'm going to pick individuals that are likely to be so that I can interpret their behavior because, of course, I'm an expert in narcissism and psychopathy. But I also do, with other individuals, analyze them under what I call the Tudor scope, Eric, so that to determine what they are. And for instance, when I analyzed Sinead O'Connor recently, she isn't a narcissist. So I provided detailed explanation as to what she was. I won't mention it in case people want to watch it, so there's no spoiler there. But with Johnny Depp, you're right. I undertook a comprehensive analysis of him around the time of the trial that was taking place between him and Amber Heard last year, and made the determination that he is narcissistic, so that he has low emotional empathy, but it does exist, that he has strong narcissistic traits, low empathic traits, but he's not a narcissist. Now, it was interesting because I covered a heck of a lot of information from a lot of different sources about that. And it's quite a compelling series. And as it went along, you could see that the people that were hugely invested in, they liked him, so they wanted him to be an empath, which is not a particularly objective way of analyzing what somebody is. Then there were a smaller number who didn't like his behavior and thus labeled him a narcissist. So again, they weren't being objective either. But once it came to the outcome, many people did accept, based upon my analysis, that yes, that's what he would be. There were many that still, hoped that he would be an empath because they see him as one of the good guys kind of thing. But that wasn't to be. But the outcome is. And when I do this analysis, it's not done from a position of judgment in terms of that makes you a bad person. It's simply what you are. So, and I can argue very much a case for a narcissist to do much good in the world, as I can argue a case to demonstrate that they cause problems in the world. So the analysis isn't about are they good or are they bad. That's for you to make your determination in relation to them because you have that perception of them. The outcome is, are they a normal? Are they an empath? Are they narcissistic? Or they are narcissist? And with Depp, narcissistic was the outcome.
To be fair, too, and I'm projecting or making an assumption here, wouldn't surviving in the industry, be it Hollywood or music industry, et cetera, wouldn't having narcissistic tendencies potentially be of value to help somebody survive that industry?
Absolutely. The entertainment industry is a honeypot for narcissists because it provides a fantastic opportunity to control lots of people. You become famous. Your fame allows you to control those people because they adore you, they look up to you, they shout and shriek when they see you. It also means you'll draw lots of fuel because people react to you. They don't just go, oh, who's that? They go, oh my God, it's Johnny Depp or whoever. So they provide a response. And then it allows you to take character traits from all of these different people that you're meeting. And of course, there's the residual benefits. It might allow you to manage a facade. It gives you access to networks. And of course, the big thing, money. So the entertainment industry is a huge honey pot for narcissists. And as a consequence of that, it means that in order to survive in that environment, you really do need to have those sharpened elbows, have your eye on the main chance, and have that indefatigable desire to succeed. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody there is a narcissist, far from it. But it does create that environment. And therefore, someone who is narcissistic similarly is better suited to that environment because they are, whilst they don't have a pathological need for control, they're generally more selfish. So they look out for themselves rather than others. They don't have such a problem treading on somebody to get ahead. And also, where you have to play the role of somebody else, where you have to morph into another character, where you have to get up on a stage in front of lots of people, or where you have to do a scene where you're doing something ridiculous or you're doing a nude scene, you have to have a considerable degree of belief in yourself that what you're doing is right and is entertaining and that you're really good at doing it. And therefore, strong narcissistic traits, pride and vanity, for example, showmanship and showcasing are important for those individuals. If you're a bit of a wallflower, you die at the prospect of thinking, what, I've got to go in front of a camera, pretend to be something that I'm not. Oh, I feel silly, I can't do it. Whereas to somebody who's narcissistic or a narcissist, or let's not forget, somebody who's normal or who is empathic, who have strong narcissistic traits, because that can happen. Doing those things, it's more natural for them. So I have a client, she's an actress, she's empathic, but she has strong narcissistic traits because she needs them to go and pretend to be other people when she's undertaking her roles.
That makes sense. And I actually, that brought up another question for me. And I'm going to speak of my own experience. Okay. I don't know what I am. I'm going to just assume normal because I flip a coin, I'm probably more likely.
Okay.
But I have found that when I'm in an environment where I get a ton of positive feedback from other people, that it gives me a complete lift, except it's almost like an adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
And I'm almost exhausted by the end of the evening, and I have trouble coming down from this.
Okay. Most people need praise. Even the most recalcitrant individual, let's say that they've done something good at work and the CEO gets on stage and forgets to mention them, they'd be hurt by that. They want to be acknowledged, but they don't necessarily want to be brought on the stage having their handshake with the CEO and being given a bottle of champagne and said, you know, go and get your applause. They'll be like, no, that's too much for me. So there are varying degrees of the need for acknowledgement and praise amongst non-narcissists. So for you, on the assumption that you're not a narcissist, you still need praise. It gives you acknowledgement that what you're doing is good, and it makes you feel good about yourself. But what you don't have is a pathological need for it that validates your existence and causes you solely to be in existence as a consequence of the responses of other people. You can go several days without having that acknowledgement or validation, and it doesn't cause you a problem. When it comes along, all to the good. And because you don't have to drink it in the same way that a narcissist does, it actually can be coming, as you just explained, overbearing and exhausting, that you have all of that and you feel great as a consequence of it, but it then leaves you feeling drained because you aren't designed to be receiving a near constant feed of that type of response.
Well put. And I kind of had that assumption, but I wasn't sure. And it made me wonder if that might be what leads some people into substance abuse and things like that, especially as they become famous, or let's say they're, as an example, a comedian or a musician or a rock star, whatever, what have you. They go, they do a show, they get all this adoration. It's well into the night. They can't come down until early, so they have to take something to bring them down from this feeling, and then that turns into a habit. It's just a thesis I had.
That is something that might occur, that as a consequence of the elation that they experience, they need to take some kind of recreational pharmaceutical to offset that. And each time that occurs, so they have the uppers and the downers, and then a habit forms. That could be the case. More usually, you'll find that an individual who is stimulated by the receipt of that adoration and adulation, who is a narcissist, that is fuel for them. And then thereafter, they will find that they keep craving that. And if it's not forthcoming, they may well turn to substances to create a similar outcome to that as experienced from fuel. Drugs and alcohol are fuel substitutes, and therefore not only as a consequence of the fact that a narcissist has a sense of entitlement, no accountability, no boundary recognition, so doesn't care about the criminality that's involved in taking illicit substances, doesn't have due regard for how it may impact upon their health, a concept of grandiosity. I'm invincible, I can snort lines as long as your arm, it was not going to affect me. They therefore have a greater propensity to engaging with those substances, and the fact that it's a fuel substitute will often mean that narcissists, not all, but many, will have issues with drink and drugs.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense to fill the gaps where they're not getting the
That's right.
other. So let's move into someone who I believe you have said is a narcissist. I don't know of which type. I believe you go over your types in the HG framework videos.
I do. Yeah.
Okay. And this individual really reminds me of Meghan Markle, or Harry's wife, if you will, and that's Amber Heard.
Okay.
Someone who, I don't know, is marginally talented, probably gets by on more beauty, though. So she might be a step above. I don't know. It's really close. It's a hard call. But you've described her as a narcissist, I believe, correct?
That's right. So again, arising out of the Depp Heard trial, I analyzed her behaviors. I'd actually analyzed her sometime prior to that, based upon other instances, and created a piece which was called A Very Performing Narcissist, and made the determination then that she was. But when she suddenly came back under scrutiny because of the Depp Heard trial, it behooved me to talk even more about the way that her narcissism was manifesting. So all of the things that she said in court, the behaviors that she did, the whole my dog stepped on a bee and then pulling that strange face, I was able to then explain all of what she was saying and doing through the prism of her narcissism, and also to do an elongated assessment of her, and also to explain what type she is. Now, she has a modicum of talent as an actress, more than this one's wife has. She is physically attractive. There'll be some that would disagree with that, but she is. You knock her hip out, and so that enables her to get by to some degree with that somaticism of her narcissism. She's a more aggressive narcissist than Harry's wife is, which was shown, of course, by the outbursts of ignited, heated fury that Mr. Depp recounted, and the instances of physical assault, etc., and destruction of property. There's no doubt that this one's wife is perfectly capable of behaving in a similar way, but she's a little less aggressive than Amber Heard is. So the two of them, without giving too much away, without people analyzing it, because I always like them to go and access the videos and find out for themselves. Sure. They sit within the same school, but they're different sub-schools.
Okay. And yeah, I was thinking that Amber Heard is a more performative. Like on the stand, I don't see Harry's wife being quite as dramatic.
No, I would agree with that. She would be less demonstrative than Amber Heard. She would certainly be the actress, but I actually think that her range is more limited than that of Amber Heard. She's not that. This one's wife is not that good an actress in the scheme of things. There are some that are worse than her, but there's a lot who are superior to her. And there was Amber Heard would be more dramatic in some of her behaviors compared to Harry's wife.
Okay, so this is leading in, this is my long meandering path to someone who I think is of substance, or at least is changing the world. People love him or they hate him. He's an extremely polarizing figure. He has personality oddities, which kind of makes sense when you are an extreme billionaire. And this is Elon Musk. And I was surprised that you had, as far as I had seen, had never done a series on Elon Musk, considering the impact I feel he is making in the world right now.
I have a long list of those people that are to go under the Tudor scope, and I like to do it properly. And
Mhm.
consequently, I am inundated with people saying, do this person, examine that person, have a
Sure.
look at this person. So he is on the list to be examined. I just have not got around to doing so.
Interesting. But can we examine him a little bit, or can we get a sample? Because again, I'm kind of bored of who I consider shallow narcissists. Maybe I'm wrong, but and I have questions whether he even is a narcissist.
Okay.
And this goes into another conversation that I wanted to talk to you about, and I thought he was a good example there. He is a self-described autistic, or as he said, has aspergers.
Okay.
There are questions about the overlap between autism and narcissism, or even psychopathy. Is this something you've studied, and can we explore this?
I have spoken previously about the overlap and distinctions that occur in relation to autism and narcissism. I've actually done a video about that, which I'd encourage people to go and watch when I've spoken about it in the past. And it's the case that you may get somebody, for instance, who's a narcissist, and typically what happens, their narcissism causes them to deflect from their narcissism, so they don't realize what they are, by saying that they're something else. So they say, oh, I'm autistic, or I'm bipolar. And it's often the case that they hold that out as the explanation for their behaviors when it's actually incorrect. And the narcissism causes them to do that, to deflect from what they really are, in order to make it easier to deal with certain people. So that's what you end up with. So the starting point could well be that he isn't autistic or has Asperger's, but his narcissism suggests that that's the case, in order to make his behavior deemed to be more acceptable. Because labeling somebody a narcissist is stigmatic, whereas being described as autistic, you're going to be met with a more sympathetic response, a more understanding response. So not only is it a means of avoiding that stigma, but it's also a means of hoodwinking individuals by thinking that something else that's affecting your behavior, rather than it being what it really actually is, namely narcissism.
Fair enough. So, as an example, I'm going to guess like P.T. Barnum, you might consider a narcissist. Have you covered Steve Jobs?
I haven't done him specifically, but I have said in the past that he was a narcissist.
Jobs, okay. And P.T. Barnum, I'm not sure if you've looked into him.
I've not looked into that individual.
Yeah, he's a historic figure, huckster, ran circuses, carnivals, things like that. Never give a sucker an even break, that kind of guy. Interesting character, but kind of likable in the sense that he's open about what he is or who he is, if that makes sense.
Well, many narcissists are likable because that's the whole basis upon which it's quite easy to control people. It's easier to control people by them liking you than fearing you. So consequently, initially at least, the narcissism will drive a narcissist to draw people in by being kind to them, flattering them, loving them, making them seem that they've met their soulmate, and all of those types of things. And you will get some narcissists, whilst they won't necessarily say to you, I am a narcissist, because they don't realize that they are, that they're quite open about their selfishness and their behaviors.
Russell Brand?
Well, he tries to dress himself up as actually caring in a way, and as a cult leader. A good example, albeit he's fictional, but a good example of a narcissist that basically tells you that he is one without actually using the word, is the character of Charlie Harper from 2.5 Men. Because he basically says regularly to his brother, like I care. And he regularly insults his mother, who also is a narcissist, but a different type. And he says, my existence is beer, and bringing back dubious women and sleeping with them. And I'm not interested in relationships. Easy come, easy go. And he recognizes that he doesn't care about people, and he freely admits it. So he is what I would characterize as an upper lesser type A narcissist, the affable arsehole, whereby you quite like him. He's a bit of a cheeky chappy. He's got some charisma. You can't help but admire the fact that he's just so in your face about his behavior that many women would actually think, gosh, he behaves like a complete shit. But I still find myself being attracted to that he basically recognizes that I'll go into a bar in order to pull somebody because I just want to take them home and have sex with them. I'm not bothered about getting to know them. So he shows that superficiality and admits to that superficiality, but he doesn't actually recognize truly what he is.
That's interesting. Okay, so I want to use another Chuck Lorre character as a counterpoint. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Big Bang Theory.
I am, yes.
Well, let's compare Charlie to Sheldon Cooper.
Yeah. Now,
Sheldon Cooper, to me, falls into that Aspergers-y spectrum.
Yes, because he deals in logic and hasn't understood the way to interact with people. Charlie Harper does know how to deal with people and still doesn't care about them, whereas Sheldon Cooper isn't a narcissist. He might be viewed as behaving like one because he can be very rude. He can behave as if he has no emotional empathy, although it's there. He isn't inherently manipulative in the way that, say, Charlie Harper is. He doesn't need to control people, but he needs to have a degree of control around him because he doesn't like unfamiliarity. It affects him in a different way. So, for instance, he always likes to sit in the same chair, doesn't he, in the living room? And he has the housemates agreement, etc. Because it's not about the necessity of controlling people per se, but rather creating familiarity for him, because unfamiliarity leaves him spinning, in effect.
Okay, so I'm really glad you brought up Charlie Harper and we could talk about Sheldon, because I kind of wonder if it's a scenario that to people around them, the effect may be the same.
Well, that's right. For instance, Charlie Harper will make a rather cutting remark to his brother about calling him a geek and that he's a loser, and that he's really useless when it comes to dealing with women, because his brother Alan ends up splitting up with his first wife, and then he basically meets a young girl who he falls for, and it's just basically she's young and hypersexualized, and so he gets a lot of hanky-panky, and then in the end, when he runs out of money, she ditches him because she's not interested in him anymore, and so once again, he's the victim. And so Charlie Harper shows no sympathy for his brother. He just basically shows contempt for the fact that you let yourself get used by these broads, whereas he is the user. So he can say a lot of things which are hurtful, and indeed, he's very direct towards his mother in terms of criticizing the way that she's brought them up, etc. Whereas with Sheldon, he can be very hurtful in what he says, but that's not as a consequence of the pursuit of control over people, but just as a consequence of the fact that he doesn't understand the social niceties that exist between people. And for instance, he's had to learn what sarcasm is. He doesn't ordinarily process what that is. And Harper is nasty in the sense that because he pursues control of people and he just doesn't give a rat's ass about anybody, he speaks his mind. Sheldon Cooper speaks his mind because he regards himself as more intelligent to everybody else, but also he doesn't recognize that sometimes it's appropriate to be discreet. He just puts it out there, but not because he needs to control people. It's just that he doesn't have that filter there.
And a good example of cutting is he makes fun of Howard, or just doesn't acknowledge Howard because Howard is just an engineer and not a true scientist.
That's right. So that is a fact, and he's completely correct about what he's saying. So when he says it, he doesn't do it in order to deliberately belittle Howard. which a narcissist would do. He says it because, well, it's true, isn't it? And he doesn't understand that sometimes it would be better not to say that because it would hurt his feelings.
Okay, this is fascinating. And having these templates to kind of go by, can we circle back to Elon? Because I can see where we could paint him with the Sheldon Cooper brush or the Charlie Harper brush.
Well, although you might fit him in with the Charlie Harpers of this world in the sense of being a narcissist, if he is one, he's not the same type as Charlie Harper. He's way different in that respect. And he, of course, had a tumultuous childhood. I mean, his father is a particularly unpleasant individual. If my memory serves me correctly, I think he's ended up having a child with a stepchild or something to that extent, showing a complete lack of boundary recognition and the way that he treated his children. Although Musk, of course, has become hugely successful, the way that he was driven by his father demonstrates behaviors which it's little wonder that Musk behaves in the way that he does now. So he has that background in terms of it's highly likely that Musk's father is a narcissist, and it's highly likely that he created a lack of control environment, which therefore raises the possibility that Musk thus became a narcissist also. And then you look at some of his behaviors. For example, when I think there was the incidents of those children in Thailand that were stuck in the caves. And so there was a British caving expert, I think, who came along, and Musk said, "Oh, here, I have one of my mini submarines, that'll solve it." It was very dismissive. And then when the gentleman pointed out how that wouldn't be helpful, he immediately dismissed him as some kind of paedophile, and litigation followed from it. Well, to make such a remark there wasn't based upon fact. It was just it was a derogatory remark that was done to belittle because he can't take criticism. In the same way, you only have to look at recently the behavior that he engaged in respect of the Anti-Defamation League, where he has criticized them. He went on a tirade about them, saying that they'd been targeting X in an attempt to kill the platform, which shows a degree of paranoia. And then going after advertisers, well, that doesn't strike me as a particularly sensible thing to do, to threaten your advertisers in the way that he's done. But it shows that response. And he talked about there being a woke mind virus at Twitter before he took it over. Now, there's no doubt that the platform was left-leaning and he's moved it more towards the right. But to suggest there was a woke mind virus, is that accurate? Well, people will make their own.
I think there's some substance to that. I mean, if you look at the Twitter files and things like that, he's not coming from zero evidence.
No, and someone of his sophistication will ordinarily utilize something that's plausible. But repeatedly, you can go back through, for instance, many of the things that have been said in relation to Tesla and that could form the basis of litigation in relation to misrepresentative observations that have been made about the delivery of certain things, and then the way that the business has been run and so forth. I mean, of course, he benefited from having a head start as a consequence of his father's emerald mine, and then thereafter did what he did at PayPal. And there's no doubt that he's an innovator and he's a very interesting man. Again, I don't say any of these things to suggest that he's a bad person, because he's sending rockets up into space and created Starlink, which has then had the effect of providing internet coverage in Ukraine. Indeed, the Department of Defense had been meeting with Musk because he holds all the cards with regard to the provision of a communications network in Ukraine, and therefore that underpins his importance. So he's done much that impacts upon humanity. But alongside that, whilst I recognize that he has his detractors, there is some substance in those observations also, because he does react badly to when he's criticized.
Yes, he is very thin-skinned in a lot of ways. He's also very capricious. I'll be the first to say that. You're like, wait a minute, what? He changes his mind on a dime, things like that. Now, a term came up that while I was looking into it, in terms of confusing the autistic spectrum and the narcissism spectrum is called vulnerable narcissism, and that can cause some confusion in there. Is that something that you have looked into or have any thoughts about?
I have created a video about the concept of vulnerable narcissism, and similar to terms such as grandiose and covert, I don't really like them because I find them to be too wide, because you can find vulnerability in all different types of narcissist. So I have a different classification system which is more accurate. So you would find that there are certain narcissists that behave, I would rather describe it as, rather than it being vulnerable narcissism, I describe it as vulnerable behaviors within that narcissism, so that you'd have a particular type of narcissist that per my classification behaves with some covert behaviors. They might have some grandiose behaviors in there, and they may have some vulnerable behaviors in there. There are certain subschools of narcissist which are more vulnerable in their behaviors than others. So as a concept, it certainly exists. And traditionally,
any examples that you can think of?
Well, traditionally, people think about narcissists as being that kind of alpha male who eats what he kills, who's, like Patrick Bateman, copulating with prostitutes while admiring his biceps in the mirror and going around and, calling it as it is. That's just one type. So with a vulnerable narcissist, they utilize pity plays. They will utilize ill health as a means of drawing control over people. So, for instance, that they might be mothered by somebody, that they're looked after, that they're fed and clothed and water, that they essentially demonstrate a helplessness so that another individual assists them. Now, you might think, well, that's a rather strange way of exhibiting control, but you're still getting that person to do what you want by being vulnerable, in the sense of, I don't know how to navigate my way through. How do I make shepherd's pie? Oh, forget it. I'll do it for you. There you are. You've just got that person to show that they're under control because they're doing something for you, and you've got the residual benefit. They're now going to make a meal for you. So the vulnerability that they exhibit is, in a way, a helplessness. It can be demonstrated with regard to showing regular pity plays. The world is against me. The universe has cursed me. People are always horrible to me. It's not fair. So rather than be striking out and saying, hey, look at me, I'm brilliant, I'm a champion of the universe, I'm a complete hero, these individuals play upon them, perhaps not being very good at things, perhaps always being picked on, always being bullied, etc. But it allows them to get to the prime aims, which is what a narcissist always seeks, namely control, fuel, character traits, and residual benefits. So it's a different route to market, if you will.
It's very interesting you brought all that up. Could there be people who are using this, and they're not necessarily diagnosable per se, but I don't know if you've heard the term cry bully?
I have, yes.
And in current society, I'm of the opinion that victims have more power. Could they be using the vulnerable narcissism traits, or whatever you define it as, in order to gain more power while they may not actually have the condition? Does this make sense?
I think it's a valid point that you may well have individuals that recognize the way the wind has blown more recently with this whole concept of wokeism and cancelling and so forth, is to pick up on this point that you just made, Eric, about the victim having more power, that if somebody says that they've been a victim of poor behavior, we really ought to listen to that person, that we should accept what they're telling you, that this is their truth and therefore it must be right, rather than actually thinking, does what they're telling me stack up? Is there any evidence to support it? So Jussie Smollett being an excellent example of that, exhibiting those vulnerable behaviors. I was the victim of a hate crime, even though he wasn't, and he completely made it up. He used being a victim as a means to control people's responses towards him, to cause them to provide him with fuel, and he was looking to get the residual benefit, namely of compensation for what he purportedly experienced. So there will be narcissists who are of that vulnerable persuasion, generally what I call mid-range narcissists, who will use the concept of being a victim sympathy symphonies, pity plays, to draw people towards them, to support them, to offer them sympathy, to demonstrate compassion towards them, which shows that those people are under control and also fuels them. It then follows that there'll be people who are not narcissists who see that this is the way that certain people are behaving. Because remember, those narcissists will wear their victimhood as a badge of honor, and they will ordinarily, if something bad happens to you, for example, you might go and speak to your intimate partner or a friend or a family member about it. The last thing that you'll do is sit down and go, I'm going to make a video about how somebody's been really horrible to me in the car park at Walmart and how I've been made a victim. That isn't the behavior of a genuine victim. It's an attention seeker and invariably a narcissist. And what happens is, because the narcissist is able to hijack social media to go, look at me, I'm oppressed. Look at me, I'm a victim. Look at me, I am the victim of this awful behavior at my university or workplace or in the street with this man. Other people watch that who aren't narcissists, and because of the herd mentality and because there are a lot of people who aren't particularly bright, they go, oh, that's a good idea, I'll do that too. And so the next time that something awful happens to them, rather than think, hey, you know what, life's difficult, man up, grow a pair, get on with it, it's, I'll go running to social media to tell everybody that I've been oppressed by the carpet salesman at Carpets Are Us. Cancel them, burn his business down, let's all march, all carpets are equal, carpet lives matter, etc. And they go racing off to social media. And so that behavior is first a catalyst by the narcissist to get to those prime aims, but then it gets copied by other people who aren't narcissists. And then it starts to become a prevailing backdrop to behaviors.
And I fear that's what's happening in society right now.
It absolutely is, that there is a prevailing wind of, once upon a time it was lunches for wimps, that grandiose narcissism. The devil take the hindmost, clamber up there, pull the ladder behind you. Now there's a greater propensity, and this is where the waters become muddied, because there are, of course, genuine victims. There are individuals who have been abused, and they then come forward to talk about the fact that they've been abused. And we've seen instances where, for instance, like Harvey Weinstein being a notable example of that, Jeffrey Epstein, those individuals who were abusing people and were convicted. Whereas what then happens, and I wrote about it at the time with the hashtag #MeToo movement, is the narcissist goes, I sniff opportunity here. They think they're a victim too. So their narcissism compels them to revise history and say, yeah, I got touched up by Harvey Weinstein as well, and joins the class action against him, even though they didn't. Or that they create a fresh complaint about some actor saying, yeah, he raped me, or whatever it might have been, when it didn't actually happen. And of course, that dilutes the efficacy of the genuine victims being believed, because along comes a charlatan who's a narcissist who piggybacks what they're doing. And then it causes more people to think, you're protesting too much. I don't think that it's genuine. So it then becomes more difficult for people to discern who are the genuine victims, as opposed to all of these vulnerable, covert, mid-range narcissists flooding the scene, going, I've been picked on, and I've been bullied, and I've been hurt, and I've been abused. They genuinely believe that they do, because their narcissism tells them that's what's happened. And they are more likely then to get on a YouTube channel and tell the world about what's happened to them, or then to get onto TikTok and start making all of these videos about how they've been hurt and depressed, etc. And it ultimately becomes nauseating.
Okay, so you would agree then that this scenario or condition is spreading like a virus, shall we say a woke mind virus?
Well, it's more a case of a victim mentality virus that's happening. And some, of course, are utilizing the concepts of my truth. That's very much the narcissist outlook. It is my truth, because we see it through a distortion field. And these individuals, because once upon a time, that narcissist might complain and someone would say, well, that's life, mate. Grow a pair, get on with it. And they have to go and they'll have to shrink away and find a friend who is sympathetic to their misery. But now they find a ready audience. Why? Social media gives them that platform, and there are far too many people who are ready to accept the word of an individual without actually testing the probity or veracity of the evidence that they put forward. It's simple enough for these individuals to come forward and say, I've been touched inappropriately, therefore you must believe me because that's my truth. Well, hang on a second. Just because you say it's true, that does not entitle you to be automatically believed. Of course, there are those that say, as soon as somebody says that's what's happened to them, you must accept it. I'm afraid that isn't how the testing of evidence works. Just because somebody says something has happened to them, you may well say, okay, we'll approach that with an open mind. When did it happen? Describe the circumstances of it. Do you have any corroborative evidence to support that? Did anybody witness what went on? Do we have any forensic evidence that supports what's occurred? It must be probed, because there are plenty of men, for example, who've been wrongly accused of by individuals, often narcissists, of course, who've been rejected by that man, and therefore, as part of their rejection, turn around and say, oh, he raped me. And then, oddly enough, certainly in the United Kingdom, the accuser has anonymity, but the man's details are published. And then he's described as some kind of sexual deviant, and he loses his job, and he loses friends because he's on trial for rape, and then he's acquitted. And again, it makes it even harder, because then it creates a body of individuals that start to think, yeah, well, you've got all these harpies crying rape when it doesn't happen. So it makes it even harder for those where it has happened to secure convictions, because there are a group of people that are repeatedly undermining them. And that victim mentality is growing in society because it's being facilitated by particular narcissists that get into a position of power within institutions and organizations. And that there's generally this idea of, I actually think what they're saying is a load of shite, but I daren't say it because if I do, I'll get cancelled. So I've got to stay quiet about it. Or I really don't accept what this person has to say. It doesn't stand up to scrutiny, but I dare not speak out about it, because all of a sudden I'll have an enraged mob piling on me on X or on my Facebook profile, led by some narcissists and then followed often by well-intentioned people who don't look at it in an objective and evidential-based manner. So at the heart of all of these behaviors, you'll find narcissists somewhere in the system, causing it, generating it, pursuing it.
All right. Perfect. Now to circle back one last time, and I know that you're going to ultimately have a series on it.
Yeah.
So can you, given the facts that you know, with plenty of room to change your mind or to adjust as more information comes in, at this point on the spectrum, would you say that Elon Musk leans towards the autistic or the narcissistic side of the scale, if there was one?
I would say that he leans towards the narcissistic.
Well, perfect. Thank you. And as I always like to wrap up, what's the one question I should have asked you, but I neglected to this time?
I think it would have been useful to have explored the triangulation that occurred between Depp, Heard, and Elon Musk.
Agree.
Yeah, but time prevents now, because it's pretty detailed, the answer that one would have to give. So that one might have to be a holdover.
Perfect. I'd love to cover that in an upcoming chat. Hopefully we keep having these. And something else popped in my mind. This is a teaser for the future, but I don't know if it's real or not, but just got into my head.
Okay.
Is communism a narcissistic political philosophy? That might be a fun exploration.
The philosophy of itself is not, but like any political system, it can be hijacked for the uses of an individual who is a narcissist, because it allows one to indoctrinate and gain the reins of power under the auspices of saying, let's all be equal and we transfer the means of production, etc. So any political system can be utilized by a narcissist. A system in itself can't be narcissistic because it's a system. It's the people that operate it. What it can be done is interpreted in a way, which is often the case. You look at how communism has been interpreted by Marxist rebels, for instance, in Africa. Often the case that there is a narcissist who's decided that they're going to undertake a coup d'etat and seize power, and then utilizes the idea of communism as the means of doing that by saying, yeah, I care about the people. Sure you do, living in your palace whilst everybody else is starving. Yeah, that's great communism, isn't it? So the system itself can't be, but it's invariably a means of facilitating the pursuit of the prime aims by a narcissist. In many political systems and many leaders, you will find narcissists because, again, political, military, governmental power and authority is a honeypot for narcissists.
Perfect. This sounds like a great future conversation as well. And we could look at all the different systems or a couple different systems.
Absolutely.
Compare and contrast. And I will look forward to that. So thank you very much, sir.
Not at all. Pleasure as always, Eric.